Hello, I'm Wayne Garrett, General Manager for Chief Ethanol Fuels. And in this video, joining us is Robert White with the Renewable Fuels Association to discuss why E15 is safe, clean, and economical.
Well, thanks for joining us here at Husker Harvest today. I'm here with Wayne Garrett, our General Manager at Chief Ethanol, and Robert White from the Renewable Fuels Association. We're talking about E15 today. So Wayne, do you want to kick things off? For someone who isn't familiar, what is E15 and how does it differ from a traditional blend of ethanol in our gasoline?
Sure, a lot of people are familiar with ethanol and they just don't really understand the E15 or the E's or the octanes or a lot of those things. But essentially, the main thing that's out there today is called E10 or 10% ethanol and 90% petroleum, products. You'll see that as 87 octane a lot. And so those are the two things. It's E10 or 87 octane. E15 is 15% ethanol or 88 octane. And so it's a little confusing to the consumer, to know that and to be educated, but that is essentially what it is.
And then Robert, so a lot of people are concerned about the safety of E15. If you get too much ethanol in a traditional engine, it could harm your vehicle is what I hear a lot of. Is it safe to use E15 and how do we know that?
Well, thankfully we've tested this fuel more than any other fuel in history. Before it was approved by EPA, Department of Energy tested over 6 million miles, 86 different vehicles. That's the equivalent of going 12 times around the moon. And then California tested it more. CRC did more testing with Department of Energy. And since 2012, consumers have driven 160 billion miles on E15, and we have had no reports of concerns or engine problems to date. So I think it's safe to say that E15 is more than safe in 2001 and newer vehicles, and of course, all flex fuel vehicles.
Well, Brent, what misperceptions do you hear about E15 and how do you address those?
Well, the most common concern that I hear is around mileage. If I put E15 in my vehicle, I'm going to see a drastic reduction in gas mileage. And while it is true that ethanol does have a lower energy density than gasoline, we also have to consider the effects from higher octane and cleaner injection systems, so better fuel injection systems in your vehicle. In my case, I recently switched from E10 as a common fuel in my vehicle to go into even E30, and that's in just my F-150, no additions or anything made to it. The mileage that I see has been pretty much the same before and after that switch. And I think, Wayne, you've seen similar things in your vehicles, multiple brands of pickups, right? They did do a study with the Nebraska Ethanol Board over multiple vehicles and hundreds of thousands of miles, comparing, in this case, E10 to E30. And they found that newer vehicles, so more produced after 2022, did see about a 6% on average reduction in mileage going from E10 to E30, but vehicles older than that actually saw a 7% increase in mileage. And again, that's just from being able to clean out those fuel injection systems, make them run more efficiently. So if we relate that, that's going from E10 to E30, so 10% to 30%. If we go from 10% to 15% in E15, we might expect about a quarter of that change in fuel mileage. And in fact, Robert, you were just telling me this morning that CARB has done hundreds of thousands of miles of studies over 20 different vehicle models and found that the reduction from E10 to E15 on average was about 1%. Some vehicles even saw better gas mileage using E15.
Well, Robert, ethanol is known for its higher octane. What is that and how does it affect performance?
Well, that's true. And it makes a big difference all the way around, from economic savings to cleaning up the fuel itself. So ethanol has a blending value of 114. And that helps the refiners as much as anything. They can stop the refining process earlier, which saves them money. It saves consumers money. And the fuel that they ship up the pipeline to the fuel terminals that ultimately ends up in the gas stations is an 84 octane. So the only way they can get it to an 87 octane that we buy today is by adding 10% or higher ethanol blends or by using premium fuel. And when you use the octane value of ethanol, it is a cheaper product than any petroleum option. And it is a cleaner product. So you use the blending value, that octane value of ethanol, and not only is it a domestic product, but is a cleaner product and a cheaper product. That octane really is just making that fuel a better product for today's engines. If people listening are old enough, they remember the knocking in the old days, or that today's fuel is so much better. It has a higher octane value, and ethanol brings that performance aspect to today's fuel.
Ethanol's been around a long time. For us, we've been making it for over 40 years now. But as you look back to some of those early days of certain misperceptions that are out there, that it maybe got started on the wrong foot back when it was called gasohol or vapor locking, a lot of those different things. What are some of those as you look back and how that's been a misperception or things have changed or whatever it has?
Well, you look back at what the vehicles were like when it debuted. We're talking carbureted engines that no one took in consideration what technology was being embraced, and that's why you look to even the small engines today. They have $7 carburetors. We think there's some advanced technology there. There is not, but you look at today's vehicles, and they are making thousands of adjustments every second to optimize and to enhance the fuel air ratios and a million other things. And it's just a different, not only fuel specifications that we're working with today to make those changes. And we do that every 6 months with these fuel specifications. But on top of that, the engines, the vehicles have advanced so much. But you can go back. You can still pull those carbureted engines from the 70s and the 80s today. And because of those changes in fuel specifications, even with ethanol, we are able to run those older vehicles on ethanol today. It's just unfortunate that some of those people that had that bad experience 30, 40 years ago still hold on to those. But it's important to note that those changes those experiences were embraced and changes were made.
So Wayne, we know that ethanol is a cleaner burning fuel, right? But in practical terms, what are the impacts on the environment? How does this matter?
So when I look at E15 or just ethanol in general, it's an octane replacement, and it's also burns clean. If we lay out pure ethanol here on the table and light it on fire, we won't see the flame. There's nothing there to put off into the atmosphere. So as we replace some of the chemicals that are put into gasoline today, BTEX is the most common name known out there, and those increase octane value, but they're known carcinogens. So the ethanol is an octane replacement for some of those harmful chemicals, and there's studies on that through the University of Minnesota, the Hormel Institute, that speak specifically to that. But as we replace that octane with ethanol, we get clean burning, high octane solutions. And it's beautiful for not just, obviously we care about it as an ethanol industry, as a farmer who produces corn, but it's also for cities that have serious pollution problems. You look at Denver, you look at Los Angeles, just some of these places, and you can clean up some of those emissions coming out of there by burning ethanol, a higher percentage of ethanol.
I want to ask Robert to follow up on that. You mentioned studies that have been done on BTEX compounds against ethanol as an octane additive. Who's doing these studies, Robert, and what was their kind of objective and findings out of these studies?
Well, it's important to examine. I mean, there's a lot of work yet to be done. Renewable Fuels Association was one of the main sponsors of the work being done at the Hormel Institute. And we looked at these other options for octane. And what we found was actually incredible, that these other octane options were not only carcinogenic, but they were causing cancer. And if women were pregnant around these cancer-causing agents, that they were actually passing those cancer-causing concerns onto the babies in the womb. And then further research, we were able to identify that not only were they causing cancer, but they were somehow, some way, this is above my bandwidth in the brain, but they were futuristically putting in blocking receptors so that it would basically block future treatments of cancer with radiation and whatnot. So not only was it causing cancer, but it was going to block the medication to cure cancer in the future. So mind-boggling to say the least, and it's something that ethanol can help into the future. That work is being shared amongst the scientific journals to hopefully give ethanol another chance in the fuel marketplace, because we can, eliminate that concern.
So we know that it's safe, Wayne, but what makes it a smarter choice for consumers? I mean, there's got to be some price benefit there as well, right?
There is, and one of the interesting things about ethanol is its biggest correlation of ethanol prices to corn price. That said in mind, with the value that comes from a bushel of corn and the amount of ethanol we get out of it, it's about roughly a 3-to-1 ratio from a bushel of corn. So when you look at prices today, where ethanol is always cheaper than RBOB as a base blend stock of gasoline out there. And so just today, right now, if you went all ethanol, you would be paying less at the pump throughout, in addition to the RIN values.
And I think expanding on that a little bit, we have to look at what this means for corn growers as we expand into an E15 market. You know, we're not going to go from E10 to E15 overnight. In theory, we're using 10% ethanol blend. We go to 15, that's a 50% increase in the demand for ethanol. But this is going to happen over a few years, and I think we're all kind of expecting that. But let's just do some quick math on what it would mean for this year's crop. We're currently projected to have a 2 billion bushel carryout. I know there's a lot of southern rust out there, and you know, maybe that number is going to change. It could go down, could go up. They got the demand side of the equation also. But let's just start with that 2 billion bushels of corn. If we made that all into ethanol using your 3-to-1 ratio, we'd be looking at about 6 billion additional gallons, a little less than 6 billion additional gallons of ethanol. So if we're going from E10 to E15, rough math, I think we use about 15 billion gallons a year. So we would need another 7.5 billion gallons. So we're almost there, even with just the carryout and the corn crop that we've got right now, if we could use that all to produce ethanol. So long term, I think it's a great consideration, a great story that if we could get to this E15 blend and actually be using E15 on all of our ethanol sales at the pump, this would be some long-term and healthy support for the corn market at a needed time.
And so, Robert, we've seen the ethanol industry make these little milestone steps, or not little, but milestone efforts as we've gone along. What do you see as the next milestone, that some of the next big steps that's going to happen with ethanol and E15? And
Well, I think one that we're standing on the cliffside right now is 2 on E15. First, it's year-round E15 getting through Congress finally. We hope that happens in the coming weeks. There's a few opportunities that are very timely. And if it doesn't happen in the coming weeks or the final months of the year, I don't know what the options are. Then you flip all the way across the country, and E15 is almost to the finish line in California. Something I'm not sure I would have ever thought we'd see. They almost banned corn ethanol from entering the state almost 20 years ago. So those 2 options will open the floodgate for retailers across the country who have been extremely hesitant to enter the marketplace with a product that they could either not sell at all in California or only sell 8.5 months a year around the rest of the country. So that, as Brent just explained, is a huge market opportunity, not only for the ethanol industry, but for corn growers and sorghum producers throughout the Midwest. And then the flip side is all of these other new uses, whether it's SAF or renewable chemicals and other renewable products, and then the export market. It's way above last year's numbers, even with some of the tariff threats and considerations. That export market is going to continue to grow, and all of those are very important, and there's a lot of opportunity for growth across all of them.
Robert, you spent a lot of time out in California, I know, the last few weeks talking with retailers as this E15 legislation has recently passed in California, which we're very excited about. What's been the reaction from fuel retailers about using E15 at their pumps?
Well, it's a mixed review, right? There's people that don't know what E15 is, and there's people that are down to changing labels and dropping fuel. That's how prepared they are. And it's, a varied group. There's mom and pops with 1 or 2 station, and then there are the majors that are sniffing around and for sure doing the analysis on what benefit that could mean for them at the terminals all the way back to their refineries. And that's exciting because, the rest of the country was a little slow at the beginning. For sure, the terminals weren't interested, and that was because of refiner influence. But when you start looking at California, not only is it an immediate year-round market, but because of the fuel prices, the 20% loss in refining capacity is going to happen at the end of the year into April. The additional taxes where some of their blending components are coming from tariff-ridden countries, they are going to, they're expecting $6, $7, $8 gasoline next year pretty easily. And the levers that they can pull to provide some relief are very limited, and E15 is one of them. So the joke continues to be that California is going to be the last state to approve E15, but instantly become a poster child, because if you even offer a fuel that's 8% less at the pump when you're starting with $5 gasoline, that your competitor across the street is only going to last so long before they have to make a move. And so I think it's going to be a domino effect pretty quick.
Well, it's a pretty exciting story. Great argument for our E15, something that makes us excited as an ethanol company. I think it'll be a great a great new realm of ethanol for both consumers and for local communities here in Nebraska. So we're excited to see it coming to fruition.
To learn more about our latest innovations here at Chief Ethanol, check out our website. The link is in the description.